In this video, we're talking to Liam, the winner of the April Brewers Cup in Singapore. Welcome, my name is Patrick Rolfe and this is Coffee with April. We just hosted the latest April Brewers Cup, and for this video, I'm sitting down with Liam, the winner of the April Brewers Cup in Singapore. So Liam actually flew in from Hong Kong to compete and had by far the best presentation and the best tasting cup. So the first part of this video, we're gonna go to him in Hong Kong and we're gonna watch him live brew and explain the recipe that he used. After that, we're sitting down together over a Zoom call and I'm asking him questions about that recipes, different recommendations, and how he approaches brewing in general, as well as what is up to next after the April Brewers Cup. So tune in, relax a little bit, watch him brew, and then go into that conversation. And as always, thank you for watching.
Hello, my name is Liam. Today I'm going to show you my brewing recipe. The coffee that we are using today is a yellow geisha wash process from Guatemala. The brewing recipe itself is, we'll start with 15 grams of coffee, with a total of 220 ml of water. In the first pool, we'll start with 60 ml of water. With a circular pool. In the second pool, in the first pool, actually, we will use 92 degrees Celsius. In the second pool, we're going to use the 70 degrees Celsius of water. You know what? In the competition, I'm using 2 kettles, but I don't do that at home or at my shops. So I just basically add the fresh water into the kettle, make sure the temperature is ideal, and we'll start the second pool. The second pool will start in 40 seconds. The first half of the second pool will be a circular pool, and the second half of the second pool will be a center pool. With all the temperature dropping with these pouring method is trying to enhance the mouthfeel, increase the sweetness, but at the same time avoiding the unpleasant flavors and the astringencies. The total brew time of these methods is around 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 15 seconds. The grind size we're using is medium to coarse grind size. If you're trying this recipe and you're finding the brew time is a little bit longer, you can try to use a coarser grind size. But if the flow rate is a little bit too fast, you can use a finer grind size. So this brewing recipe, you will find a really smooth and round body, a very high sweetness in your cup, and it will not really lower the acidity, the flavors. I would say a really balanced cup of coffee, something I like, and I hope you enjoy this recipe. Thank you so much.
So I'm sitting here with Liam, then the winner of the April Brewers Cup in Singapore, right? It's good to see you again, man. How are you doing? You good?
I'm good. Yeah, how are you?
Very good, for sure. Everything is basically as normal here in Copenhagen, and we're getting ready for the next April Brewers Cup as well, which is going to be in Bangkok. That's a story for another video. But all good. So it's been a few weeks now, 2 weeks since you won, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how that's been. How does it feel? Are you kind of happy with how the competition went?
I'm of course, I'm really happy that I won the competition. It's been actually nothing's changed for me. I'm still working in the coffee shops, brewing coffee, serving same the same recipe actually I'm using for for the coffee shops. But the competition gives me something else, so I'm trying to put it back into my daily routine and see how can I improve from there.
Mm-hmm. So you say the recipe you used in the competition is what you're using in the coffee shops now?
Did I understand that correctly? Kind of. Yeah, it's quite similar.
It's quite similar.
Yeah, I try to create a recipe that I can use like daily. Try not to too complicated, so I can brew like a few at the same time.
That's really cool. I think that's it's always a conversation when you compete. I think in different competitions where a lot of people say that you want to have more recipes that are easier to use or more kind of applicable for like home brewing and bar brewing, because competitions in general gets critiqued for not being relevant for the kind of normal coffee world, right? So it's kind of cool to see that you then apply the recipe that kind of works. And something you mentioned as well, which I think is interesting, and I had this conversation a lot, it's the also in the April Brewers Cup, right? You have the first round where you're brewing one coffee, and then you have the final where you're brewing three coffees. And a lot of people that have been competing, they know that there's usually a difference. Because the second you start brewing three coffees, you're going to have to think about pouring structures and timings. And when you created your recipe, did you kind of work with just brewing one cup, trying to make the tastiest possible cup? Or were you really thinking about how do I take this recipe and turn it into three individual brews?
At first, I tried to create two different recipes for the first and second round. But what I think is it doesn't make sense because entering the second round, that cup of coffee should be the best one I think I'm serving. That's why I'm trying to create a recipe is the same way that I'm brewing the first and the second round.
Which I think makes sense. And I'm remembering your cup. I do think that because in the final, your cup was distinctly better than the other cups, kind of. Like it really kind of stood out as I think the best cup in actually the whole day, which is interesting because when we're looking back in Manila, the first competition, it wasn't necessarily the very best cup that won. It was a very good cup, but it wasn't the best cup throughout the whole day. But you kind of really saved the best for last. And I think we're going to break down. I have a few questions about the recipe, like the video we just saw. But in the April Brewers Cup, the biggest difference between the first round and the second round is that in the second round, you can use your own water. So tell us a little bit about how are you thinking about brewing water? What did you actually do in the competition? And how are you maybe thinking about brewing water at home or in the coffee shop as well?
For me, the brewing water is a little bit tricky because I'm not from Singapore. I don't really try the locals' water. So what I've been doing is I try to find a distilled water brand that's available in both Hong Kong and Singapore, and I start playing with it. I tried Wave water and aqua-cold, and I think aqua-cold gives me more control in terms of the ppm. So I can adjust a higher ppm or a lower ppm. So that's what I go for. And for the water part, I think for home brewer, for people who are working in coffee shop is quite different. Because when you're in coffee shop, you actually can't change the water you're working with. But when you're a home brewer, you can actually buy something new. You can actually try to create a water for yourself. So I think it's quite fun. I didn't use the water from the coffee shops. I just basically start using those alcohol water because it's more simple and easy to play with. because someone told me try to make your own water with the minerals, but I think that's something that I wanted to work with in the future, but not in my first competitions. Yeah.
No, sure. I think that's something that's often quite complicated to do, I think, and we see a lot of competitors that do it and it doesn't quite work for various different reasons. Now, one of the things you mentioned, you were looking for a distilled water that was available in both Hong Kong and Singapore. Does that mean that you find a big difference in between different distilled waters? As in, you think it's really important to kind of always have the same? So if you take Aquacode and blend it into two different distilled waters, do you think the result would be very different?
Yes, I actually tried with local brand and this brand of Singapore. I actually prefer the local ones, but they are not available in Singapore. And
Okay.
I tried to find the water specs in their websites, and I find even though they're both distilled water, it's quite different. Quite different. So I think it has a big impact on the brand.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting, and I think it's I have a very similar experience when I've been traveling and competing in my past as well, where the distilled water is actually very different, right? And I think a lot of homebrewers, for example, are at a point now where they're trying to use distilled water, but they can't always make it work. We get that as a comment on a lot of our videos as well, where maybe they try the same recipes, but it just doesn't taste so good. I find a very common thing actually, which is I think just interesting in general when it comes to brewing, is that we sometimes get people writing in and they're saying that the brew time is very fast. Like they're saying that basically the water goes really fast through the coffee. And I often then the first question from me is always, what's your water? And in most cases, this is people that have mixed their own water, adding some kind of mineral to distilled water. And what happens often is that the water and the minerals don't always homogenize. So basically, even if you measure the TDS and it looks decent, you're actually brewing with almost empty water. So basically the coffee can't absorb it. So it's just going to go straight through. And then you have these really, really fast brewing times, right? So that water makes a big difference, right? And I think in your case, in the competition, that also made a lot of sense. And it also, I think, fitted that specific coffee very well as well. I kind of want to ask you how much of your recipe is specifically based on the competition coffee? I assume, like being in Hong Kong, did you try the coffee before, or was it in Singapore?
Yeah, I tried the coffee a few days ago because I received the coffee like on Tuesday, Wednesday. So there's like
Okay.
two to 3 days for me to try the coffee before I leave.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Did I try to adjust? Yes, but it's really like fine tuning the recipe for the coffee. But in general, it's quite similar to what I do.
So, so you would say that as you brew many different coffees, you kind of start with this, let's say, base recipe, and then you just make tiny tweaks on that recipe to adapt to the coffee. You don't change everything just because you have a different coffee.
Yes, I'll say that because, and also it's really based on what kind of coffee. For example, the competition with the beans we're using, it's wash coffee. Sometimes when we are brewing natural coffees, that would be a little bit more different than the rest. The recipe would be a little bit more different, but in general, it's more or less the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, and for maybe the people that wants to try your recipe here, what would you change? Let's say they have a natural processed coffee at home and they wanna brew that. What would you change in your own kind of recipe to maybe make that better?
Well, first, I assume it's we're using the same April Brewers. So for the
Sure.
recipe,
Sure.
I would change the probably the grind size. The first thing I'll work with the grind size. The second thing I will work with is the ratios. coffee water to coffee ratios.
Sure.
And now you were 15 to 220, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
15 to 220. Yeah.
15 to 220. So if you have a natural, would that mean, let's say, more coffee, less coffee, or more water, less water?
I'll probably go less water, a little bit less.
Yeah. Okay.
For natural coffee. Yeah.
And you said a little bit different grind size as well, right?
Yeah, because like the brew time, the drawdown time, it's quite different for wash coffee and natural coffee. So that's what I'm looking at. I think brew time is quite important, but not necessarily the most important factors. But we do need to look into it.
Did you? This is more of a personal observation, and I actually don't remember that 100% with your in your competition. But did you let all of your water go through in the final pour, or did you lift off the filter before all the water went through the coffee bed?
I think in the final round, 3 cups, there's 1 cup that I didn't let all the water go through because I mentioned the brew time and I don't want to mess it up. So I took it off. But for the rest of the 2, should draw down everything.
Okay, that's interesting because I think that's also something that set you apart from the competition, because based on most competitors and also traveling in Southeast Asia, it's very clear that a lot of people are cutting off their brews. So they're not letting all that water go through, which in a competition setting makes it really complicated unless you're measuring the beverage weight. It's very hard to know that you had the exact same amount of liquid. So in the competition, we had several people that in the final where the coffee was tasting very inconsistent because they clearly had very different beverage weight, right? So that's kind of why I'm asking. Back to the grinding, because also in the video, I don't think you're mentioning which grinder you used. What grinder did you use in the video and also when you competed?
In the competition, I'm using the Weber tea grinder.
Which model?
It's the key grinder, the new one.
Okay.
The Chronicle one.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And what grind setting did you use?
I used actually a quite coarse grind size because they suggest you to make 3 rounds to tune it into the filter coffee settings. So when you dial it back to 0, there's 0 to 14, I think, and you need to turn 3 whole circles to start with the filter coffee grind size. So I start from there. Probably 6 to 7 more cores than they suggest. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I think you're
Oh, sorry. For the grind size, I think it needs to pair with the dripper, the coffee brewer, because when we look into some other coffee brewer like the V60s, they obviously have a faster brew time, drawdown time. So for April, in the second pour or even more pours, the drawdown time start getting slower. But it doesn't mean it is a bad thing. You just need to understand the dripper and you use more good grind size for the dripper. So when we have what I think is when it have a more slower drawdown time, we tend to use a coarser grind size, so you can avoid those unpleasant flavors, the astringencies. Because when you go a little bit finer, those kind of stuff tend to come out faster.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I think that's always very important with using any kind of brewer, right? As in coffee brewing will always be a system, and it's important that you're kind of on top of all parts of that system to be able to get the best result, right? Now, one other thing you did as well, which I thought was interesting. So you're dividing your brew into 2 pours, right? And you're doing 50 gram first, and then are you then pouring 170 grams in the second pour?
I do first one is 60 and 160.
So 60 and 160. Okay, that's my bad. I took wrong notes. 60 and 160. Okay. And then what is quite interesting, and I think something that we have seen in the official Brewers Cup competitions before, but maybe don't see so much in normal bar use, is the fact that your second pour is with a considerably lower temperature. So you're starting with 92 and then you're moving over to 70. Tell us a little bit about what's the thought about
that. When I try to use the same temperature in the whole brew, we tends to extract a little bit more astringency, especially when the beverage cools down. So I try different things, like the grind size, like the ratios. I find that it gives up a little bit on the flavors, or if I change those settings. So I try with the temperature, and I think it's actually I watch videos from one of the very famous Japanese guy called I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, Tetsu. His recipe.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
he's a good friend.
His recipe on the switch, Vario switch, is really nice. I tried it out and I think it was a really cool idea brewing with the Vario switch. And he used 3 pools, and the last pool is a full immersion pool. They close the valve and brew like 20 to 30 seconds, and they open it, draw down, and finish. But in that pour, he lowered the temperature to 70, and that's why I try out lowering my second pour temperature, and I find out that the acidity, some sweetness can still be extracted during a lower temperature. But if you use it on the whole brew, probably not ideal. In the first brew, when you use a high temperature, you give enough energy, enough time for the coffee bag to absorb those energies. Fully saturated a little bit more. You don't really need that much energy to extract those like good acidity, some sweetness. And the brew time, I think it actually helps. A longer brew time, it actually helps to strengthen the mouthfeel, but at the same time not extracting the astringencies.
I think so too, and the key is, I think what's so difficult with coffee brewing is always going to be mouthfeel in relationship with, let's say, flavor quality and taste balance, right? Like it's easy to kind of get individual components right, but if you're trying to get that full kind of harmony in the cup, then that is very difficult. And I also agree that a longer contact time can help with that. But as you said, with a longer contact time comes other obstacles, right? That you also have to kind of try to manage, which is sometimes quite difficult. But then it's interesting to see that a different temperature is it's maybe helpful. I was just in Kuala Lumpur and did one of our homebrewing videos, and we had a person there. She made 3 pours, and for the last pour, she actually took room temperatured water and just poured into the filter as well, for like a very similar reason, to just kind of manage that temperature. So I think it's quite interesting. It's definitely something that's definitely worth talking about, right? Is there anything else with your recipe or like coffee brewing in general that you find that you really want to share? I think it's really important to think about for maybe someone that is competing, or do you have any tips and tricks when you're competing? Were you nervous? How did you deal with that? Did you practice a lot, or was it kind of just you walked up without practicing, or how did you do this?
for something about brewing, when you are practicing or when you're trying to improve, looking for something to improve on your recipe, because you mentioned people tend to take out the dripper without fully draw down.
Sure.
And I find that really inconsistent, but at the same time, really hard to adjust in your next cup. Because you don't actually know what you're extracting in your recipe, fully extracted in your recipe. So it's really difficult to adjust in the next brew. Because what I usually think is I always look for the next pour, the next brew, how to improve than my first one, than my last one. So even though I know the cup I'm going to drink, it's going to be not tasty cup of coffee, I will still let it draw down, so that I know what happened and what to change into my next cup. So I think that's my advice to people who try to improve your recipe or try to get into the competition. When you're preparing, what I would say is try to make it your brew as consistent as you can, so that you know what to improve. Yeah.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? And you really want to go step by step, right? So you need to understand what you've done to be able to change that and adjust it to make it better, right? That's really cool. Maybe one last question before we kind of round this up. I'm always very curious, like what's happening next? Are you going to go up competing? You said before the next Hong Kong competition is going to be early next year, for example, for the Chicago. We just had the guy that won, Bennett, that won the Manila competition in April Brewers Cup. He was second place in the Filipino Brewers Cup, which I thought was kind of cool. So, super interested to hear what your kind of plans on the near and distant future is. Competition and coffee and otherwise.
For competition, yes, I'm looking at it, and I'll see if that's something possible for me to try to get into. It's one of the things that I want to try. That's why I joined the April Brewers Cup, to see how far I can go, and should I really invest in the competition world. Or for the next step, yeah, probably the competition. And you asked me questions on what I'm up to, what I've been working on. The first thing I come back from Singapore is I actually trying out new recipes, trying to improve my own recipes. Because after receiving the comments from you guys, the feedbacks, the debrief sessions, and talking with other competitors, is really inspiring. And I think that it helps my my coffee sense, my coffee taste, and try to how to make it more easy and accessible to everyone. That's what I'm working on right now. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting thing, right? And I think for me personally, also that's one of the main reasons why I've been involved in the official competitions for such a long time is just that, because whether you win or lose, you're coming back with a lot of ideas, a lot of energy, especially maybe if you lose, actually, because then you really want to become better. But then again, even if you win, there's always something you can improve on, right? And it's even the winners don't get perfect scores often, right? So there's always this level of kind of what is the next step, right? And I think when competitions are used correctly, they are a source of energy and inspiration, rather than frustration and something negative, right? So I think it's really a positive thing. And personally, I'm looking forward to see what you're going to be up to. And as you know, if you're going up in your national, that April and myself is here to support in whatever way you want us to support. And with that, I just want to thank you for taking the time. Super nice, and I hope to see you when I'm in Hong Kong next time, which will hopefully happen soon. Yeah. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
So we're going to say thank you to Liam and all the competitors in the April Brewers Cup in Singapore. We're looking forward to do more of these videos as we have more competitions coming up in the future. The next competition is going to be held in Bangkok in early December. So if you're in the area, you want to compete, you want to watch, you want to see it, make sure you tune into our website and our social medias to follow the progress of the different competitions. With that, as always, we want to say thank you for watching. Don't forget to follow us on Patreon, subscribe, share. It's always really helpful. As you know, we just started our home brewing concept as well, so make sure you tune into those videos. And with that, we just want to say thank you and have a good day. We want to give a special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters. It's because of you that we are able to continue to make these videos. And we want you all to feel free to always come with suggestions and ideas on the content that you want to see, because we are doing this for you and because of you. Thank you from all of us here at April.